Why don't you just disappear? My husband snapped during a dinner with friends after his college buddy joked, still letting her handle the finances? Bold. My husband looked at me, smirked, then said, she tripled our net worth in 18 months. Can you say that about your fourth startup? The room erupted. If someone had told me 12 years ago that my husband would one day look at me across a dinner table, smirk, and say something that would turn a room full of people into a roaring audience, I wouldn't have believed them. Not because Zane wasn't capable of it. He had always been sharp, the kind of man who knew how to carve people up with words while making it seem like a compliment. But because back then, I still thought we were on the same team. The night it happened, the dinner table was set in a way that screamed wealth: thick linen napkins, crystal glasses catching the chandelier light, candles flickering over plated entrees that no one really wanted but would pretend to enjoy. Zane sat beside me, his fingers lightly resting against the stem of his wine glass. He looked good. He always did. It was part of his talent, knowing how to present himself, how to make people listen. Across from us sat Tucker Beasley, an old college friend of Zane's, the kind of man who had always carried himself with the confidence of someone who never had to worry about consequences. Next to him was his wife, Janelle, her manicured nails tapping softly against the rim of her water glass, her smile polite, but thin. We had all been making small talk, the kind of conversation that felt carefully measured, until Tucker leaned back in his chair, stretched an arm across the back of Janelle's seat, and smirked. Still letting her handle the finances, huh? Bold move, my guy. The air in the room tightened, just for a second. It was a joke. But not really. It was the kind of thing men like Tucker said to test the waters, to see if they could get a reaction, to see if they could poke at something without drawing blood. Zane didn't hesitate. He turned his head just slightly, let a small smile cross his lips, and delivered the blow with the ease of someone who had practiced it. She tripled our net worth in 18 months. Can you say that about your fourth startup? The room erupted. Laughter, claps on the back, the sound of wine glasses clinking. A few chuckles came from people who didn't even know what the hell they were laughing at, but they knew it was good. Zane barely reacted. He just took a sip of his wine, letting the moment stretch, letting the words sit there. And me? I smiled, because I had already done the math in my head. 18 months ago, I found out my husband was cheating on me. And I had spent every second since making sure that when the time came, I would be the one walking away. With everything. Zane and I had been married for 12 years. 12 years of building, planning, mapping out a life that I had once believed would be solid, unshakable. I had been good at managing money long before I met him. It was my job. Financial consultant wasn't the flashiest title, but it came with power, the kind of power people don't notice until it's too late. I knew how to move money, how to structure investments, how to make things disappear into places no one would think to look. Zane never questioned it. He let me handle it because it made his life easier. And I was happy to do it. Until the day I found out that the man I had built my life with was sleeping with someone else. I wasn't supposed to see the message. I was sitting on the edge of our bed, scrolling through emails, when his phone lit up beside me. He was in the shower. Can't wait to see you again, baby. Last night was amazing. There was a heart at the end of the text. My pulse didn't spike. My breath didn't catch. It was calm, the way I knew it would be before a storm. I read the message 3 times. Then I put the phone back down. I listened to the sound of water running in the bathroom, the familiar hum of him clearing his throat. And I made a decision. I didn't confront him. Not that night. Not the next. Instead, I waited. I let him go on, completely unaware, while I prepared. I began shifting accounts, small amounts unnoticeable at first. I started making different investments, opening accounts in my maiden name. I compiled everything I could find: texts, statements, records. I dug into his finances deeper than I ever had before, and I found things even I wasn't expecting. Money I hadn't known about. Expenses that didn't add up. It wasn't just one woman. It was 2. Possibly more. And one of them? I knew her. Janelle. Tucker's wife. That part almost made me laugh. Because it was so typical of men like Zane, men who believed they were the smartest in the room, men who thought they could play games without getting caught. I let it go on for 6 months. By the time we got to that dinner party, my work was already done. The moment I saw Janelle leave the table and slip upstairs, I followed. I knew where she was going. I stepped into the room just as she sat down on the edge of the bed, her phone glowing in her hands. She didn't hear me at first. She was too busy reading the text from my husband. I let the moment stretch. Then I said her name. She looked up, startled. Rachel. I held up a hand. Save it. Her mouth opened, then closed. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. I handed it to her without a word. She stared at it for a moment before pulling out the contents. Divorce papers. Filed under infidelity. And underneath that? Every receipt. Every screenshot. Every lie. Janelle's face crumbled. I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice. If I were you, I'd start thinking about what you're going to tell your husband. Then I turned and walked away. Zane found me minutes later, his drink in hand, looking every bit the man who still thought he had the upper hand. Ready to go? He asked. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had once been my partner, my love, my future. And I saw him for exactly what he was. I've been ready for a long time. I stepped close, brushed my lips against his cheek, and whispered, "Why don't you just disappear?" Then I walked out of the house. And I took everything with me. I didn't look back. Not as I stepped out onto the front porch. Not as the night air wrapped around me, cool against my skin. Not as I walked down the driveway toward my car, leaving Zane, Janelle, and the whole dinner party in my wake. But inside, my heart was pounding. Not with fear. Not with regret. With the kind of anticipation that comes when you know you've just started something that can't be undone. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. For a moment, I just sat there, hands resting on the wheel, my own breath the only sound in the silence. Then my phone buzzed. Zane. I let it ring. It buzzed again. This time, I glanced down at the screen and a message popped up. What the hell did you do? I smiled. And then I pulled out of the driveway. I didn't go home. Because home wasn't home anymore. Not for a long time. Instead, I drove to a hotel. A quiet one on the edge of the city where no one would look for me. I had made the reservation weeks ago, knowing this moment was coming. I parked in the underground garage and took the elevator up to my room. Once inside, I locked the door, kicked off my heels, and pulled out my laptop. I had work to do. I opened my email and found the drafted message I had written days ago. I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering over the mouse. Then I hit send. Within seconds, it was done. The email, the attachments, everything gone, sent to my lawyer, my bank, my carefully chosen contacts. The paperwork that would start the official process of untangling my life from Zane's. Divorce papers were just the beginning. I had spent months preparing for this, making sure that when I walked away, I wouldn't just be leaving with my pride. I would be leaving with control. Control over our assets, our investments, our money. Because what Zane didn't know, what he had never thought to question, was that I had done a lot more than just move a few numbers around. I had locked him out. Bit by bit, piece by piece, I had been shifting the power in our finances. The accounts he thought he had access to? Frozen. The investments he believed were under his name? Transferred. And the house? He would find out soon enough. I closed the laptop and leaned back against the pillows. A deep, slow breath filled my lungs. Then I exhaled. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to relief. Zane didn't call again that night. But I knew he wouldn't stay quiet for long. And I was right. By the next morning, I woke up to 26 missed calls. I took my time. Ordered coffee. Let the messages pile up. By noon, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. Rachel. His voice was tight, clipped, controlled anger. I stayed silent. You really think this is going to work? He asked. I sipped my coffee. I know it is. A sharp exhale. Where are you? I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Not home. Silence. I could hear his frustration, the way he was forcing himself to stay calm. This is ridiculous, he finally said. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you're making a mistake. I don't play games, Zane. Oh, really? So what the hell was last night? I let the question hang. Because he knew. And I knew that he knew. He finally spoke again, lower this time. You ambushed me. I almost laughed. Ambushed you? Oh, sweetheart. You ambushed yourself. His breath came out in a short, frustrated huff. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice softer now, trying a different approach. We can fix this. And there it was. The panic. He was beginning to realize what I had done. That this wasn't just a fight. This wasn't me threatening to leave in a burst of anger, waiting for him to say the right words to pull me back. This was final. Rachel. I could hear it in his voice now. The edge. The fear. Come home. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. Then I said, very calmly, Zane, I am home. And then I hung up. The next 48 hours were a blur. Emails. Phone calls. Meetings. My lawyer moved fast. By the time Zane realized just how much power I had taken from him, it was too late. His accounts? Frozen. The real estate investments he thought were safe? Reallocated. The house? No longer his. And Janelle? Well, Tucker found out everything. And when he did, he didn't just throw Janelle out, he made sure Zane felt it, too. Because what Zane had forgotten, what he had always overlooked, was that money isn't just about numbers. It's about power. And I had all of it now. The last time I saw Zane, it wasn't planned. I was leaving a meeting downtown, stepping out of a building onto the busy sidewalk, when I heard someone say my name. I turned, and there he was. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He looked different. Tired. Older. Not in the way of someone who had aged naturally, but in the way of a man who had lost control. "You won," he finally said. I tilted my head. "What was the prize?" I asked. He exhaled, looking away. "I loved you," he muttered. And for a moment, something inside me almost cracked. But I didn't let it. I studied him carefully, then said the only thing that mattered. "You should have thought about that before." Then I walked away. And this time, I really didn't look back. I thought that would be the last time I saw Zane. I thought that after I walked away from him on that crowded sidewalk, I was done. But men like Zane? They don't just disappear. Not when they feel like something has been stolen from them. Not when they feel powerless. And definitely not when they think they can still win. The first sign that he wasn't going to let this go came 3 days later. I was at my lawyer's office, signing the next round of paperwork when his assistant knocked on the door. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation." My lawyer, Mark Atwood, raised an eyebrow. "What kind of situation?" She hesitated. "Your client's husband just showed up downstairs." I stiffened. Mark glanced at me. "Do you want me to handle it?" I exhaled slowly. "No. Let him up." Mark studied me for a moment, but nodded to his assistant. "Bring him in." A few minutes later, the door swung open and Zane walked in like he owned the place. Except he didn't. Not anymore. He wasn't wearing his usual confidence. His suit was slightly rumpled, his tie a little loose, his jaw tight with frustration. But his eyes? Still sharp. Still calculating. "Rachel," he said, nodding at me before glancing at Mark. "Mr. Atwood." Mark didn't even bother to stand. "This isn't how we do things, Mr. Whitmore." Zane ignored him. He turned his full attention to me. "We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. "We are talking." He clenched his jaw. "Alone." I gave a small smile. "You lost the right to ask for that." Mark cleared his throat. "If you have something to say, Mr. Whitmore, say it now. Otherwise, I'll have security escort you out." Zane glared at him, then turned back to me. "You think you've won?" he said, voice low. "You think you can just walk away from this and pretend like I don't exist?" I met his stare, unblinking. "I don't have to pretend." His nostrils flared. "You don't get to do this to me, Rachel." "Do what, Zane?" I asked, tilting my head. "Play the game better than you?" Mark sighed. "All right, that's enough." "No," Zane snapped, stepping closer. "This is not over." I held his gaze steady. Unshaken. "Yes, it is." Silence stretched. Then, without another word, Zane turned and walked out. The door closed behind him. Mark exhaled. "You okay?" I picked up the pen and signed the next page of paperwork. Perfect. But Zane wasn't done. A week later, my accounts were flagged for review. An audit request, one that could have only been triggered by someone with connections in high places. I knew immediately it was him. It wasn't a real concern. Everything I did was legal, clean, airtight, but it was a delay tactic. A desperate attempt to stall. I called Mark, who handled it swiftly. Then, 2 days after that, the house I had taken control of mysteriously had a buyer interested. A private buyer. Zane. He was trying to buy back his own damn house. I declined the offer without hesitation. But then the real move came. Tucker. Tucker Beasley was the wild card. And Zane must have known it, because that's where he decided to take his next shot. I got the call late one evening. I was in my hotel suite, sipping wine, watching the city lights flicker through the massive window, when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Tucker. I hadn't spoken to him since the night of the dinner party. Since he found out about Janelle. I let it ring twice before answering. Tucker. A long silence. Then a sigh. "He came to see me." I leaned back. "Let me guess." He played the victim. Tucker gave a dry laugh. "Oh, you'd love the speech he gave me. Talked about how you manipulated him. How you trapped him." I rolled my eyes. Classic. But then, Tucker continued, his voice shifting. He said something interesting. I waited. "He said you weren't just leaving him." I didn't respond. "He said you were coming after everything." Still, I waited. And then he asked me if I wanted to team up. That caught my attention. "He wants to go after me with you?" "Oh, no," Tucker chuckled. "He wants me to help ruin you." I inhaled slowly. And what did you say? Silence. Then I said no. I exhaled. But Tucker added, that doesn't mean he's done trying. I closed my eyes briefly. I know. Rachel, Tucker said, voice softer now. He's spiraling. You humiliated him, you outplayed him, and now he's looking for a way to get back on top. I opened my eyes and looked at my own reflection in the window. Let him try. The next day, Zane made his next move. He went public. An article appeared online. A subtle, carefully worded hit piece about a woman in finance accused of unethical dealings in her divorce. My name wasn't in the headline, but my name was in the article. He wanted to ruin my reputation. He wanted to make me the villain. I stared at the screen, reading the carefully placed words, half-truths, vague accusations, the kind of strategic smears that couldn't be traced directly back to him but had his fingerprints all over them. I set my phone down. Then I picked up my laptop. Zane thought he was winning. He thought I was just going to sit back and take it. Zane had made his move. And now it was my turn. I didn't panic. I didn't flinch. I just did what I did best. I strategized. The article? It was sloppy. Rushed. His emotions were all over it, and emotions make people careless. It didn't say anything directly damaging, but it planted seeds, little whispers of doubt, meant to make people question my credibility. Too bad for Zane. I had already accounted for this possibility. By the time I walked into my lawyer's office that afternoon, I had a plan. Mark was already waiting, the article printed out in front of him. He gestured to it. I assume you've seen this? I nodded. He's trying to tank my reputation. It's a weak attempt, Mark said, flipping through some documents. But it could make people nervous. We need to get ahead of it. Already working on it. Mark smirked. I thought you might be. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Tell me, I said, sliding it across the desk, how much of a conflict of interest do you think it would be if I were to reveal that Zane used marital assets to fund a private account overseas? Mark's eyebrows lifted. He flipped open the folder, scanning the contents. A slow grin spread across his face. Well, Rachel, he said, tapping a finger against the papers, I think that would be a very, very big problem for him. I leaned back in my chair. Good. I didn't just counter Zane's attack. I buried it. First, I released a public statement, clear, professional, unshakable. I laid out the facts, my role in our finances, the paper trail proving every transaction was legal, the real reason I had taken control of the assets. But I didn't just defend myself. I made him the problem. Zane wanted to make me look unethical? Fine. I gave the world something worse to talk about. I made sure the right people got their hands on the overseas account details. And within days, it wasn't me being questioned. It was Zane. Zane had one thing left. His public image. And he was desperate to keep it. Which is why, exactly 1 week later, I received a call from his lawyer. Mr. Whitmore is willing to negotiate. I smirked. Of course he was. I let them sweat for a full 24 hours before agreeing to meet. When I walked into that conference room, Zane was already there. He looked different. His confidence wasn't gone, but it was fractured. There were dark circles under his eyes. His suit was crisp, but his tie was loose, like he had barely put himself together before walking in. And when he looked at me, for the first time, I saw something new. Resentment. And maybe, just maybe, regret. But that was his burden to carry. Rachel, he said, his voice clipped. Zane, I replied, taking my seat. His lawyer cleared his throat. We'd like to reach a settlement. Mark, sitting beside me, leaned forward. A settlement implies you still have something to bargain with. Zane's jaw ticked. I turned to him fully. What exactly do you think you're offering me? Silence. He knew. I had everything. Every asset, every account, every strategic move. Rachel, he said, softer now, don't you think we've done enough? I tilted my head. You tell me. A muscle in his cheek twitched. He exhaled sharply, then glanced at his lawyer. Give her what she wants. Mark smirked. Now we're talking. Zane didn't look at me again. He just signed the paperwork. And just like that, it was over. A month later, I stood in the doorway of what had once been our house. The keys rested lightly in my hand. The house was mine, but I had no intention of keeping it. I walked through the empty space, taking one last look at the life I had built, the life I had left behind. And I felt nothing. No sadness. No longing. Just satisfaction. I locked the door behind me and handed the keys to the real estate agent waiting outside. Sell it. For how much? She asked. I smiled. Whatever makes me the most money. Zane faded from my life like a bad investment finally written off the books. His name occasionally popped up in conversations, whispers about his failed ventures, his crumbling reputation. I didn't care. I had better things to focus on. Like my new home. Like my new business ventures. Like my new life, one where every choice, every decision, every ounce of power was mine. And Zane? Well, he was just a lesson learned. And that was worth everything. A year later, I found myself sitting in a sleek corner office overlooking Manhattan. Not Zane's office. Mine. I had taken the settlement money, the real estate profits, and my business acumen and built something better. Something bigger. Something that belonged only to me. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee as I scanned through the latest financial reports. My investment firm, Whitmore and Company, yes, I kept the name, just to spite him, was thriving. The irony? Zane had tried to start something new. Some flashy venture meant to restore his name, his power, his ego. It failed within 6 months. The last I heard, he had moved out of the city, downsized to a place far smaller than the one I sold for a fortune. And Janelle? She didn't last either. Tucker had left her. The scandal had made her untouchable in the circles she once flaunted herself in. Last I heard, she was working for a third-tier marketing firm, struggling to stay afloat. I had thought I might feel some vindication knowing all this. But honestly, they weren't worth my energy anymore. I had outgrown them. Just as I was finishing up my work, my phone buzzed. A text. From Tucker. Drinks tonight? I owe you one for proving me right about them both. I smiled. I had gained a lot from this whole ordeal. Power, wealth, control. But maybe, just maybe, I had gained something more. I grabbed my coat, turned off my office light, and stepped into the city night, where my future, my real future, awaited.